Hello, and here again with part 3 of this RTS Hidden Gem timeline. First game we are going to cover has fused aspects with another genre, changing the perspective from a third-person bird's-eye view we normally encounter in the RTS games to a first-person view like that coming from an FPS. Battlezone, developed by Activision and published by Rebellion Development in 1998 for the PC, fuses both the RTS and FPS genres in one game. This game bears little to no resemblance between the 1980 game with the same title, aside from the first-person perspective and shooting at tanks. Within Battlezone, you play as a commanding officer in first person who is riding a hover tank. You are capable of firing at enemy tanks and buildings with a multitude of weapon types, but trying to take down the enemy alone will only get you so far. Your ability to command your units to harvest, attack, defend, and follow you is what is most essential to your success. The orders can be issued directly by interacting with the target as you approach it, or by radio transmission, which essentially means that you are able to control your unit's behavior while present anywhere on the map. There is no function to switch the camera angle to the zoomed out bird's eye view that would easily reveal the location of your units. The user interface UI that they have created to help you in controlling the macro management is effective for this perspective. Visible in the interface, it has unit and buildings divided in numbered sections. These sections contain offensive units such as tanks, bombers, and walkers, and the defensive units that are usually stationary near the base, like the turrets. It also separates the utility units, the scavengers for example, also known as the harvesters. Each of these divisions can be selected by clicking the number on your keyboard that represent them. Selecting a building, you are capable of packing it up and planting it into another geyser location, or while it is stationed, recruit units. This UI is extremely user-friendly, but if you are used to playing a traditional RTS with a view from the sky, it may take some time in using it for its full potential. There is a building that will allow you to see in a satellite view to help you with dispatching your units to further locations of the map. The building is called the Communication Tower, and while it is useful, it's impractical to stay in this view the whole time. Being the commander that is also capable of attacking and maneuvering to stay alive, the first-person view must be used then. Moving over to its visual aspects, this RTS is fully 3D, which was still uncommon in '98, but not at all for FPSs, as most at this point shifted to 3D, as it was a necessity for a genre that plays in a first-person view. We also need to talk about how you're able to just give a command and the unit will go to the closest area to accomplish the task. The recyclers will plant on the nearest geyser, the scavengers will harvest the closest scrap metal, and defensive units will attack enemy targets within their range. You are still capable of having them complete the task in a specific way by clicking the area you desire. Same idea when you command units in a normal RTS. As usual, within Battlezone there are two factions, the US forces and the Soviets, who are fighting over the biometal resources on the moon and many planets across the galaxy. Each of these factions have a set amount of missions, with many objectives being the usual: destroy the enemy base, protect and transport special units, and locate hidden artifacts. This RTS is a very unique hidden gem, with a lot of different features incorporated not found on the classic RTS. And of course there is quite a learning curve in regards to the controls and using the UI, but it is enjoyable once you get the hang of it. Overall, this FPS-RTS hybrid was quite successful critically, garnering at least more than an 80% or an 8 out of 10 on most video game critic websites. Although financially it was not exactly what the creators hoped for, as it fell short in the category, underselling 200,000 copies its first year, in comparison to their other developed game, Dark Reign, which sold 500,000 copies and was released a year earlier. Regardless, Battlezone was very unique, and it is the only RTS and FPS hybrid that was successful in combining the two genres. The next RTS we will discuss is also unique for the genre in a sense that it is one of the first RTS games to introduce a Z-axis, meaning that now you can travel through higher and lower levels of altitude in space. Homeworld was developed by now widely known Relic Entertainment as their introductory game. It was published by Sierra Studios, known for publishing the popular FPS series Half-Life. This RTS is set in space, where a group of people called the Kushans, who are inhabiting the planet of Karak, found out that they are not the indigenous people of this world and seek their homeworld,
Higara, our home.
with further discovering that their homeworld was a planet called Higara, which they are set out to look for while boarding their newly built mothership. Along the way they faced many undiscovered alien hostiles who are seeking the Kushans' destruction. What really stood out when first playing Homeworld is the in-depth tutorial that is provided. Most RTS during this time rarely had tutorials, or even the simplest explanations of how to play. It was assumed that you learn from playing previous RTS, or a trial and error where you pick up as you play. I imagine with Homeworld's complexities and differences from the classic RTS, it is necessary to have an in-depth tutorial. The general idea of the RTS principles are present, where the mothership is your main base. It provides you the ability to recruit units that can attack, harvest resources, and aid with the research process. The mothership does have some defenses that when enemy ships approach it, it will fire using light damaging cannons, but you can't rely on them as they hardly do any damage, which is why it makes it very important to recruit units to defend and go even a step further and research the higher tier combat ships using the research ships built from the mothership. The mothership is also a docking station for the smaller ships, such as the fighter and corvette class, to refuel their tanks, as a ship without fuel will remain immobile in space until you have one of your support frigates or repair corvettes refuel them on the spot. Another important feature available in this game that plays a big part in gameplay are the camera views. Having the ability to rotate the camera view in all three axes, zooming in and out, and to focus the camera view on selected units makes it easier for the player to locate enemies, as the depth perception can be deceiving if you do not have any of these camera features. The map sizes, if that's what they are to be called, are massive, and the fact that you have an additional Z axis, it would be impossible to move your ships within the field of view, even when it is zoomed out as much as possible. For a solution to dispatch units to far out locations of the map, there is a sensory mode which basically has a scaled down diagram of the entire map. While you have your units selected, you can click a waypoint as far out as possible to explore or attack the enemy units that are highlighted in red. You can also choose the altitude you desire to travel by holding shift to make it conspicuous. The UI setup in Homeworld is hidden and revealed when having the cursor hover over the bottom of the screen, which in turn means that you view more gameplay action while it is unused. When you do click onto any of the modes available on the UI, Sensor, Builder, and Research, it does shift you away from the battlefield, as it takes up the whole screen until you are temporarily finished from using it. Positive outcome from this is that it is fully detailed and self-explanatory on how to use the modes. Homeworld has had a remastered version created in 2015, developed by Gearbox Studios, which bought the rights to the series a few years earlier. On top of major graphical changes, there are also some UI changes and gameplay changes to the mechanics, because it is now using the Homeworld 2 game engine. A prime example is the refueling requirement of almost all ships has been removed in the remaster, and there have been fixes to some bugs and glitches to the original game. One example is where the ships will orbit aimlessly around the mothership when you order them to dock. Homeworld was a success, winning many awards including Game of the Year by IGN and PC Gamer. The sales were also very strong, selling over 250,000 units within its first weeks of launch. If you want to enjoy an RTS that might be out of your comfort zone for the first few hours of gameplay, but that will be well worth it once you familiarize yourself with the entirely unusual gameplay compared to the classic RTS, then look no further, because Homeworld, like Battlezone, is well worth the struggle for a massive amount of gameplay and unique RTS features. We have seen before that the RTS sometimes will include gameplay aspects that come from other genres. One genre that seems to frequently be added in with the RTS is the RPG. The next game we cover will have the RPG aspect shown loud and clear. Warlords Battlecry was developed by Strategic Studies Group and published by Strategic Simulations. I initially thought they were both part of the same company, or at least divisions within a broader company, but they don't seem to have any direct relation, aside from the fact that both develop and publish mostly war games and turn-based strategies. A lot of the games developed by Strategic Studies Group seem to have had some success despite flying mostly under the radar. At first glance, we can immediately see that Warlords Battlecry is set up to be played like that of a classic RTS style, but there are a few notable changes that we should discuss. The resource gathering, although present, has taken quite a different turn in how they function. Gold, metal, stone, and crystal are the 4 resources to collect in the game. They can be harvested within mines containing them throughout the map. In order to harvest from these mines, you will need the main hero, the one whom you created, or certain lesser heroes that have this ability to convert them. Once they are converted, they will produce 1 unit of that resource per second into your stash. There is no need for any harvesting units to aid you in the resource collection. Though converting a mine does not guarantee that you'll keep that mine forever, as enemy heroes can also convert mines, and it can become a back and forth amongst you and the AI for ownership of these mines. To note, the conversion is not restricted to only the mines. Most buildings can also be converted, but it always is used on the mines, as there is no other way to build them. Another feature that differs in this game is that prior to starting the campaign level, you are given points to use to build an initial army. You can choose between minor heroes that you pick up along the way that cost more, or standard units for less. This initial army is useful to help you easily withstand enemy raids during the initial base setup, or especially during campaigns with fixed units, so it is important to choose wisely and combine units that will work well with each other. With the RPG aspects, we can see that the hero and even non-hero units can gain experience and level up through kills. This aspect was not introduced in this RTS, but actually KKND, which I covered in the last Hidden Gem video. But it was more primitive in a sense that you had no clue what level the unit was, and they became veteran once the voice acknowledgement changed. Leveling up, of course, increases the statistics of the unit, or hero, and that is really all that changes. Though the one hero that differs is your main hero character that you build when starting a new single player campaign. Identical to other RPG games, you have customizations of the character portrait when the hero is first created, and eventually, you choose a class that dictates the spells and abilities you can learn. You also advance your statistics, skills, abilities, and spells using your ability points you earn once you gain a level. The level up for the main customized hero occurs after the campaign has been completed, and not during gameplay, as you will need time to decide the hero's path. Your main hero also has the ability to pick up items that can help with boosting their stats. These acquired items can be found on their inventory menu. Of course, mission objectives vary, and you don't only resort to destroy the enemy base. There are types of missions such as explore and search with fixed amount of units, rescue friendly heroes,
Master Elfwine,
and hold off enemy waves of attacks. Nothing too out of the ordinary we haven't already seen on RTS during this time. But there are optional quests that you can entice in that will help you with acquiring resources, special units, or artifacts when completed. Some of the quests can be as difficult as defeating enemy heroes to as simple as solving a riddle. I believe Warlords Battlecry had unique ideas with these RPG additions, but I did find some overall negative issues. Firstly being the bugs. I've had the game randomly freeze or abort to the desktop more frequently than any RTS I played recently. It is quite possible that this is due to the version that I'm playing on GOG. I also noticed that the UI has moments where it does not allow you to click a certain button until it has been clicked multiple times. The enemy AI expands quickly and raids come at you ruthlessly, with little breaks in between to help you rebound. In my opinion, the medium difficulty level feels like it's hard when you are playing this RTS for the first time. There is also a method that I don't enjoy using in an RTS, is to pause the game and set out as many commands, and resume the game when you are ready. It will allow you to think and set out orders without giving the AI any advantage, as they are paused also. The reason I do not like using this is that it takes away from the RTS's main purpose, real time. One of the main point and rules of the RTS is that you have to think and react as fast as possible. Overall, the criticism of this game was fair, and sales were subpar, only selling less than 9,000 units in its first few months of release. Regardless of these few minor issues, Warlords Battlecry was indeed a hidden gem, being nominated for Best Game No One Played at GameSpot's Best and Worst 2000s Awards. Warlords has quite a vast series from past games and sequels of this particular spin-off called Battlecry, with 2 and 3 released in 2002 and 2004 respectively. For our next game, I believe it is one of my favorite RTS hidden gems. I played this RTS a lot to fill the void between Warcraft 2 and 3, and surprisingly it helped. Kingdom Under Fire, a war of heroes developed by a Korean team called Fantagram, was in charge of the series as a whole. A War of Heroes was published by a gathering of developers who was known for publishing mostly mediocre and not well-known video games from the 90s to early 2000s. Kingdom Under Fire once again combines the RTS and RPG genres into one game. It resembles much of the classic RTS and really had me thinking it was a Warcraft clone at first glance. The factions are very similar, Human Alliance versus the Orc Horde in Warcraft compared to the Human Alliance versus the Dark Legion in this RTS. Also, they possess similar storylines.
The savage invasion of the orcs.
Greater Horde offensive is as yet unknown,
where the Dark Legion is composed of orcs, ogres, and the undead, who seek out the human, elves, and dwarves' destruction over past geographical disagreements and lingering resentments.
Elves, they disgust me.
Single-player campaigns show the same story, but in the view of each faction's perspective. It does not necessarily mean that the 12 campaigns of each of the factions are the exact same, but has you playing as one or the other, although some of the missions, this is the case. As the title states, this is a war of heroes, and when on the battlefield for a mission, you will at least have 1 and up to 5 heroes who gain experience levels that carry over throughout the whole campaign. On top of statistical superiorities compared to the regular units, they also have spells and abilities that use mana points to perform. However, the player has to keep most, if not all, the heroes alive in the mission. Alongside the standard missions where you build your base and army, there are RPG missions which you solely control heroes. The heroes are able to pick up usable items such as potions, keys, and equipment to increase stats. The CGI cinematics and cutscenes were the usual quality with dialogue similar to past RTS and nothing special. However, the voice acting during certain moments of the cutscenes and briefing were a bit of a joke with a lot of hyper-exaggeration.
My father, I am coming to you!
It was disappointing as the story was not the worst I've seen for an RTS.
Leave his body there. Let the carrion feast today.
A few other issues visible in the gameplay was the fact that there was no in-game saving until the Gold Edition was released later that year. Can you imagine playing some of the extremely long missions that had as many as 4 enemy teams on a large map for hours straight without being able to take a break and play the next day? Or if one of your heroes died being 3/4 of the way to completing the mission? The Gold Edition added missions on each of the factions that were based on the prequel stories of the First War of Heroes, the Zoc Knights assembled to take on the evil Lich. On top of the one main setback of no in-game saves, there are a few other gameplay issues to bring up, of course. The one I did not actually have an issue on, but it was that you can complete almost all your mission with just the heroes alone, provided that you have one of the ranged heroes, Loriana or Lily, for the Dark Legion missions, and Moonlight to cast his blizzard spells to shred the flying creatures. Of course, recruiting units and using them on invasions did make it easier. The complaint behind this is the fact that the heroes were overpowered, especially when they increased to higher levels. The other issue was the lack of direction during some of the RPG campaigns, had your heroes wandering in circles to find the right path. Yes, there was a map, but it was primitive with no detail. Kingdom Under Fire was neither successful critically, getting nothing higher than 70% on most game critics, and financially, only selling 20,000 units its first year of launch. Mostly a forgettable RTS with a promising story, but a terrible and bland ending. It also claimed by many to be a Warcraft 2 clone, and not to crap on this game even more, but just to put it in perspective, the quality of this RTS compared to Warcraft 3, which came out a year later, is almost light years in difference. Still, I spent many hours playing this game as it had the classic RTS elements with an RPG aspect that made it more personable to each of the heroes. And there you have it, part 3 of this RTS Hidden Gem timeline. What did you think of the video overall? Do you feel that Battlezone and Homeworld are anomalies for the RTS? And would you have wanted more RTS similar to the gameplay styles? The RPG element was commonly found in the RTS in the late 90s to early 2000s. Do you want it to make a comeback for a newer RTS release? Don't forget to comment what you think, like the video, and subscribe if you haven't already, please. Thank you, and later.